migrations that shorebirds complete each year. This is just simply an American Avocet to hold and pull our space. Not a lot to say behaviorally about them. We'll get into that a little bit more. So like most beginning birders, my first views of shorebirds were kind of distant and backlit and small and really hard to identify. And I didn't get excited about them early on. It took a number of years before I really took to trying to get good photographs of them, get good light angles and better views so I could really see what was going on. And today it's not unusual to see me crawling around in the mud or laying in the water. Pro tip, waders don't work worth a darn if you're laying in the water. We're going to talk about Baird sandpipers here a little bit, and mainly just to show that the behaviors involved with these birds are just never-ending, just all kinds of variety of things these birds do. This is simply a migrant Baird's on beautiful beaches at Whitefish Point. I've captured Baird sandpipers preening and ruffling after a bath, doing wing waves on the breeding grounds of the Arctic tundra. And in fact, actually, this isn't the Arctic tundra. This is the outfield of a baseball diamond in Barrow, Alaska. Most people don't know that Baird sandpipers like to speed skate. And I'll just pretend everybody's laughing at that since I can't hear you guys. I'm not sure what's going on with this Baird sandpiper, but he sure seems to be having fun, letting out a call with a foot in the air. And I finally captured a photo of a Baird's feeding in kind of the grassy margins of a mud flat. They'll be found in a little higher, drier locations than a lot of the other shorebirds. So the shorebirds use a variety of different means to forage, different strategies, different structures, and design. Typically, the longer the bill, the deeper they're probing into the mud, and the deeper the water they can forage in. So long-billed dowitcher here. Here's a short-billed dowitcher. They use a sewing machine type motion to kind of feel around in the mud. As they're sewing up and down, they may actually feel their prey with the tip of their bill, and you'll see that the tip of this short-billed dowitcher's bill is quite flexible. They can open it underground and grasp whatever they bump into there. Woodcock has a long bill, can probe deeply for earthworms, and they're foraging in the woods, not so much on mud flats like most of the other shorebirds. This long-billed curlew, they'll put their head in the mud and the sand and twist and turn and reach things much deeper than many other shorebirds can reach. And here we have a red knot on its southbound migration, actually feeding on some zebra mussels. And they'll actually consume these and regurgitate a pellet of the parts that are not digestible. Willets will also take some small clams and mussels and regurgitate pellets. Ruddy turnstones, they're going to forage with that bill. It's wide, it's heavy, and they'll actually turn over stones and look for food underneath larger items in the rack line, under driftwood, etc. I've also witnessed them foraging on fish that have washed up on the beach. Here's a group of avocets. They were actually cooperatively feeding, sweeping their bills back and forth through the water as they ran along. I think the front birds were doing mostly stirring up the mud, and the birds in the rear were probably catching a little bit more prey. There's a very active feeder. The lesser yellowlegs was running across the water, skimming and snapping up tiny fish, little minnows. And typically the shorter billed birds like the plovers, they're going to pluck at things on the surface of the mud or the sand. Thank you, Jamie Cunningham, for the loan of this image. This is a black-bellied plover pulling up a marine worm. This is another one of Jamie's images, and this bird was actually clipping off all the legs on this little crab before consuming the body parts. There's a buff-breasted sandpiper was foraging on the lawn and feeding on moths up on the lawn, not even using the shore. Sanderlings, as many of you know, will chase the waves, and they're going to run down the beach as the waves recede, and they're going to dig into the ground and come up with some food. You can see that a couple of these birds have captured some prey. But let's zoom in a little closer, and what we're going to see is that these are beach hoppers that the birds are foraging on. And I can remember when I was young trying to find what these things were that were making little holes in the receding surf. But as we zoom in a little bit closer, here's a little bit better look at a beach hopper. I can remember catching them myself after digging deeply into the sand. One more zoom in. Phalaropes are well known for their spin feeding. This is a red-necked phalarope, creating a little vortex here, pulling invertebrates up off the bottom, and they'll adeptly snap things off the surface as they're spinning. And the red phalaropes will do the same. They're not quite as hyperactive as the rednecks. They don't spin as fast, and sometimes they have to reach a little deeper and tip feed like a dabbling duck in order to catch their prey. So all this foraging helps these birds put on a massive amount of weight for migration. This is a piping plover photographed up at Metzger Marsh, and he's kind of lost his neckline. He's gotten real thick through the chest and neck area, and a lot of shorebirds will double their body weight prior to starting their migrations. This is a sanderling in full breeding plumage, and it really doesn't have a neck at all. It is plump. It is ready to leave the shore of Lake Superior, and next stop's probably going to be in the high Arctic. Many shorebirds will defend not only a breeding territory, but also a feeding territory in migration. This is a sanderling trying to make himself look a little bigger in defense of some neighboring sanderlings on the beach. And we see the small bill of the semi-palmated plover, again, a surface feeder here, and you can see all the flies actually that the bird is foraging on the mud flat. But he's actually defending a little bit of space against this intruder that's trying to get into his prime feeding area. More thanks to Jamie for the next few images. You see the whimbrel here, and looks like he's displaying, but he's actually being a little defensive, because over here in the right corner, we've got a tiny piping plover that is giving this whimbrel the business. The piping plover is nesting, and it's going to defend its nesting territory against any intruder, even if it is 10 times bigger. Here's the showdown with, again, the piping plover. The whimbrel's trying to stand up to him, but he's invested in his nesting area here. And the whimbrel's still arguing about it, but eventually the piping plover is going to win that battle. What a great series. I know Jamie wishes she could have been better closer for a little better view of these birds, but the nesting area was actually roped off. But just a fantastic interaction that she captured. So these birds that are migrating to the high Arctic, a lot of times they're really pushing their luck. There's not a whole lot of food for them to gather when they get to the high Arctic, when it's still frozen, covered with ice and snow. It's a semi-palmated sandpiper. Actually, you can see a little bit here that the partial webbed foot is where the name semi-palmated comes from. Here's an American golden plover in a little bit better conditions on the breeding grounds. And the plovers, the golden plovers especially, will do a couple of different flight displays on the breeding grounds. They fly, one of their displays, they're very butterfly-like. maybe even short-eared owl-like in their flight, very buoyant and light-looking. They'll do some flights where they fly parallel to a neighboring territory against a rival male, and they'll also do some marching down that territorial line to establish boundaries. This black-necked stilt was very territorial and was actually trying to chase off the intruders that were paddling around in kayaks. So they not only defend territories against other birds, also mammals and humans. Same with the avocet. I was actually on a dirt road adjacent to a marsh, and I was nowhere near where the bird was nesting, but the avocet just didn't even want us up there on the road. Did a lot of flying and circling around. We think of shorebirds as being ground dwellers, but there's a few species that will display from elevated perches. We've got the common snipe here. Lesser yellowlegs perched up in a white spruce on the breeding grounds. And a Hudsonian godwit teed up at the tip top of a black spruce on the breeding grounds at Churchill, Manitoba, doing some wing up visual displays. This is one of my favorite stories. I encountered long-billed dowitchers on my first trip to the high Arctic in Barrow, and we hadn't seen any dowitchers the first couple of days, and we encountered this flock. And it was really neat to watch as one bird would pick up a tiny little dwarf willow stick, and another bird would challenge it for the stick, and a fight would break out. So the birds would fight, and two birds would leave the group. And then the next thing you know, I'm not sure where the yellow line came from there, if everybody can see that. Hopefully that'll go away. Is that on everybody's screen, Rob?
It is. Looks like you drew on it somehow or another.
Somebody's name popped up on my end, but I didn't recognize it. I'm going to try to close this out and reopen it.
Okay.
Let's see what that does.
You stop the share screen too.
Yeah.
There we go. That fixed it.
Cool. So it was really interesting watching this behavior because they kept fighting over this little, half-inch long dwarf willow stick. And the birds would battle. They'd claw at each other with their feet, bite at each other with their bills, and they would fly off. So the flock was diminishing, and then single birds would fly back in and rejoin the flock, and this fighting continued. The next day, the entire tundra was covered with mated pairs of long-billed dowitchers. And I was really interested to come home and read all about what this display was. And I could not find a single thing in the literature, and to this day have not found anything in the literature regarding this display. Pretty cool to see that and encounter that. Might have to restart here. Didn't want to advance. Now it's advancing good. So just a very cool behavior to see, and I love telling that story. I get goosebumps every time I do, just knowing that really nobody else has witnessed this type of behavior and documented it. And this is a shot of one of those individual birds coming back to the flock after fighting and flying away. So I love a good portrait of a bird, especially in nice habitat and scene. And this is a nicely marked dunlin, but really the behavior of the birds is what keeps me going back and revisiting some of the same places, trying to capture many of these things that I've seen. So here's a dunlin that's doing a wing up display. And what I didn't know is there was a female crouched down in a depression nearby. So this Dunlin kind of does a march with his wing in the air and ended up copulating with his mate down in a little depression. And it's pretty common to see the Dunlins doing the wing up display. This is one of the peep sandpipers, a white rump sandpiper. And again, beautiful bird, nice setting on the tundra, but was just amazed to see the wing up displays that these birds were doing. And, you know, I think most people know buff-breasted sandpipers do these wing up displays, but I'd never realized that many other birds had so many other unique, interesting behaviors on the tundra. Here's that white rump. And what I found is this bird was displaying, there was I think his mate ended up being behind us, and we hadn't seen her because she was not, you know, being, you know, flashy with the wings and stuff. But I think we got between him and his mate, and that may have triggered the interaction with, maybe it's just a contact display, just kind of let her know that he was still there. Semi-Palmated Sandpipers, pretty nondescript and let's be honest, a little boring on the mudflats in migration, but on the tundra, on the breeding grounds, they are simply out of control, just constantly calling, running around, aggressively chasing each other, wing up displays, tail cocked, just full of energy and hyperactiveness. They do hover displays. They'll pop into the air and hover for 45 seconds or more into the wind. And sometimes they will just hover almost completely in one place. So I realized I could slow the shutter speed way down and focus on this bird that's in flight and still get a sharp shot of the bird's body, but blur out the wings by going to a shutter speed of about 1/40th of a second. And they're calling the whole time during this display. The white rumps also do a very similar hover and calling display. This bird, the buff-breasted sandpiper, is one of the species that originally drew me to the Arctic back in 2007. I believe was my first trip to the high Arctic, above the Arctic Circle. And it's because I wanted to see the behavior, the breeding displays. Buff-breasteds will lek, much like a sharp-tailed grouse. And in that lekking behavior, they're going to display to the females that have gathered. There's a buff-breasted showing off to the lek. And this female seems to be somewhat disinterested over here in the not paying a whole lot of attention to his showing off. As I was photographing this bird, this buff-breasted kept coming closer, and I really didn't realize it was coming closer, but I found myself, backing up constantly, trying to get that wingtip into the frame. And I remembered that someone had told me that they will display to people as well, and I believe now that that's what was happening. Why I had to keep backing up. The bird just kept approaching me. Here's an embrace display. The male's just showing off the wings. There's two females actually inspecting the wing linings. And this is how they're going to determine if he is a suitable mate. I've also witnessed a display that I've not been able to find any literature on. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to capture any images of it, but I refer to it as a trampoline display. And one bird, male or female, I don't know, was just bounding into the air and coming back to the ground and instantly bounding back up. And it looked, the timing of it looked like it was bouncing up and down on a trampoline. And I've only ever seen that one time. Thank you, Tyler Ficker, for this amazing photograph of a buff-breasted sandpipers at the lek. This male has attracted a number of onlookers. I'm not sure what I was doing, maybe taking a nap on the tundra. I missed this shot altogether. The ruff is another shorebird that exhibits lekking behavior, much like the buff-breasted sandpipers. And this guy was actually displaying to a female pectoral sandpiper. There were no female ruffs around for him to show off to, but he was showing off to the female pectoral sandpiper, much to the dismay of the male pectoral sandpiper, I might add. And speaking of the pectoral sandpipers, this is a male exhibiting an alert posture. They'll stand up on a tundra mound and kind of stretch their body upwards and look around, and it's kind of a sentinel type pose. And before they get ready to do their flight display, they're going to inflate this pouch. They have an expandable throat and neck area. They're going to inflate that, and they're going to do their flight display. During the flight display, that pouch actually bounds up and down along with the sound of their call. The first time I heard this on the tundra, I thought it was maybe an alien spaceship or something. I'd never heard that recording before, and it took me a long time to actually figure out what was going on. But you can see how dramatic the throat expands and makes the bird all barrel-chested. And this is actually bounding up and down across the chest through the course of the flight. And the reason I'm able to capture these in-flight photographs is because the male will stand on his little mound and repeat the flight over and over again. Anytime you have that repetitive action, it just makes things a little easier to get in place to capture that photograph. And this is this must be an older pectoral sandpiper. He's got a spare tire like I do. The pectorals also do a territorial boundary march. This is presumably two males at a boundary of territory, and they're literally just marching along that boundary next to each other. This was happening over my right shoulder while the American golden plover was doing the aerial routine in front of me. So I turned and got a couple of shots of it. The male pecks really are probably my favorite when it comes to all the different displays they do. Wing up displays, calling, flight displays, parallel flights, parallel marching. And then this guy is really showing it off. He's got his chest sticking out, his tail's up, he's calling. And this female that's right here, hidden in the grasses, is looking like she's probably receptive to breeding at this point. So why do they spend all of this energy to display and carry on and establish territories? And it's all for raising young. Here's a nest of American golden plover eggs. I'm sorry, those are the black-bellied plovers. And black-bellied plovers will do some wing distraction displays, much like a killdeer, if they're disturbed at the nest. And a lot of these birds are going to be hunkered down, and you don't know that they're there until you've actually moved them off of the nest. If you look closely, you'll see the red knot here. And this guy or gal was sitting on the nest, and we didn't even know it was there. We were just walking back towards the car, and one of the participants nearly stepped on it. The bird never moved. He backed off and called to the group. We were able to come over and take some photographs of it. So they're going to rely on the camouflage to protect them. You can see the end of the tail here, the back here, but the bird's just really well hidden in the tundra grasses. Phalaropes have a pretty unique mating strategy. You see the male here is actually less brilliantly marked than the female. Usually you think of male birds as being the pretty ones and the females being a little bit more drab. And that's because in the phalaropes, this female is going to lay the eggs, but the male is actually going to sit on the nest. Same with the red-necked phalaropes. In fact, the male is going to sit on that nest, and the female may go find another mate and lay a second clutch of eggs. So a red-necked phalarope laying eight eggs in the matter of a week or two, the weight of those 8 eggs is equivalent to about 1.5 times her body weight. A Herculean effort for sure. And interestingly enough, the male's going to stay, raise the young. The males are going to leave. The females are going to depart probably right away after laying the eggs. The males are going to leave, and amazingly, these birds are pre-programmed and know where to go in southbound migration. All the immatures travel together with no adult supervision. Part of the nesting strategy involves egg turning. Here's an American Avocet rearranging the eggs in the nest. I'm getting ready to sit on them here. There's a couple of Avocet chicks, not too long out of the nest. You see this is referred to as the egg tooth. The little white tip on the bill is hardened and helps it break out of the egg. And shorebird chicks are largely self-sufficient within about a day. They'll be off foraging on their own. They're not being fed. They're finding their own food, but they do come back to the adults for warmth. It gets chilly at night. Maybe it's raining or something, and the chicks are going to go huddle up underneath the adult for warmth. And you see 2 sets of legs tucked up there underneath the wings. This is a Western Sandpiper chick, very well camouflaged at birth. And again, I've seen Western Sandpiper chicks still in the egg, still soaking wet in the egg, and within a day, within just a few hours, usually they're out of the nest, running around, fending for themselves. So why do I have a picture of a lemming in a shorebird program? Well, we all know that the lemmings really are important food for snowy owls. And, when the lemming population is high, the glaucous gulls are going to do well. The Jaegers, like the long-tailed, parasitic, and Pomeranian Jaegers, all these birds are going to do really, really well when the lemming population is high. But interestingly enough, the shorebirds and songbirds of the tundra are also going to do they're going to fare much better when that lemming population is high, because that's the primary and preferred food source for all of these predators, including the Arctic fox and all these avian predators. But when the lemming population crashes, it's desperation time for everyone. So I've actually seen Pomeranian Jaegers tearing apart red-necked phalaropes. These birds are going to feast on eggs and chicks in the nest, and also go after adult birds. So it's an important part of the story, the lemming population. So that means a really good reason for these birds to develop a good camouflage pattern. This surf bird would almost disappear if you took your eyes off of it for more than a few seconds. And the birds tend to inhabit, their habitat and their territories. They tend to blend in really well. This buff-breasted sandpiper couldn't match the golden background any better here. Ruddy turnstones have a lot of dark feathering, and you tend to find them in areas where the tundra has some upheaval from freezing and thawing. You got that really dark dirt and the bird blends in well. The Dunlin, their back pattern mixes really well with the willow leaves from the previous fall that are still a little orange and red on the tundra. And these birds have just incredible eyesight. I was photographing a female Pectoral Sandpiper, and she hunkered down on the ground, laid her chest flat, and turned her head to the side, looking upwards. And I was on the ground. I rolled over with my binoculars, and I started scanning to see if I could see, what this bird was seeing, why she was going into hiding. And finally, minutes later, and now I'm using 8X binoculars, but minutes later, I finally spot a Peregrine Falcon that was just a speck in my 8X binoculars. And this bird, the Pectoral, had picked up this thing several minutes before I could find it with the aid of 8X binoculars. Just amazing how well adapted they are. We've got a woodcock blending in very well to its surroundings. With the eyes perched up high on the head, they can actually see behind themselves with binocular vision. We've got a snowy plover here that just disappears against the white sand beaches of southern Florida. And this is just to help protect them from any kind of danger. So here's a lesser yellowlegs doing some preening. This is during a southbound migration. Birds, the shorebirds have been documented, especially during molt and during migration, that some of them will spend up to 10% of their daily time allowance just simply caring for their feathers, bathing, cleaning, preening, oiling, etc. They need to keep these feathers in top condition to protect themselves against the weather and help them make some of the amazing migrations that they do. So sometimes a shorebird looks like my friend Bill here, and this is how you look if you're really serious about photographing shorebirds. You're down, dirty, muddy, but then you have to take a bath. You got to get cleaned up. So the solitary sandpiper, this bird was bathing so energetically and it was so fast you couldn't even actually see what was happening other than just the splashing and the darting back and forth, just very quick movement. And I was lucky to capture this scene with a fast shutter speed. The most ambitious bather I'd ever seen. We're going to go through some bathing and preening strategies with short-billed dowitchers here. First, we're going to get wet, splash around, and get the feathers good and soaked. This guy was really into it on this nice warm day. Lots of splashing, getting everything wet. And after they do the bathing, a lot of times they'll do a little flap to shake off some of that excess water. They may even bound into the air and drift back down to the ground. But then the preening really starts. And somehow, some way, with this super long bill, this short-billed dowitcher is able to clean all of the feathers on its body. And what he can't reach with his bill, he's going to rub his head and his chin around on. We're going to get the neck with the underwing. Got to get the chin. Don't forget the chin. There's that flexible bill tip again. And these shorebirds all have an oil gland at the base of the tail. So this long-billed dowitcher is actually squeezing that oil gland, getting some of that oil on the bill. This buff-breasted sandpiper is going to get some of that oil onto its chin and neck feathers. But they're going to pull those feathers through their bill to spread that oil around. And this is just a maintenance thing. The solitary sandpiper that was aggressively bathing, now it's doing the preening. And so it's a maintenance thing. They're getting their feathers back in alignment, getting them waterproofed with the oil. We've got a stilt sandpiper. The molting causes them to preen and bathe and such even more. It's probably an irritation to the skin as these feathers are coming in. What you're seeing here is a juvenile stilt sandpiper first fall migration, and it's growing in its first winter plumage. And these scalloped feathers are their juvenile plumage, and these are their first winter plumage, these feathers that are coming in without that scalloped edging on them. And after the preening, a lot of times they'll shake things loose and help get all the feathers back in alignment with a little ruffle. A lot of times you'll see a wing stretch at the conclusion of a preening and bathing session. This is a stilt sandpiper. And usually if they stretch one wing, they're going to turn around and stretch the other wing as well. And if you're really lucky, you'll catch that double overhead wing stretch as they're just feeling good about life and getting everything lined up where it's supposed to be. So they spend a lot of time taking care of these feathers because they really do some amazing, amazing migrations. Some places that you can see huge concentrations of shorebirds, Ketchimak Bay in Alaska and Grays Harbor in Washington. Both host actually shorebird festivals to celebrate the migration of western sandpipers and dunlin, other shorebirds that pass through the area. It's a huge flock of western sandpipers here. We're talking tens and hundreds of thousands of birds in the Grays Harbor area. The red knot, most of us know that big numbers of red knots are going to congregate on Delaware Bay every spring to feed on the horseshoe crab eggs. I would be remiss not to mention New Brunswick, and I'm drawing a blank on the name, the Bay of Fundy. Hundreds of thousands of semi-palmated sandpipers are passing through there. This is a Wilson's phalarope, one of the lesser known, but even more amazing migration concentration points for phalaropes. You get the Wilson's phalarope and the red-necked phalarope at the Great Salt Lake. These birds congregate in the hundreds of thousands, up to 500,000 Wilson's phalaropes. This photo was graciously shared with me by Mia McPherson, but up to 500,000 Wilson's phalaropes will congregate on the Great Salt Lake. Up to 300,000 red-necked phalaropes, another amazing image by Mia. Appreciate her sharing these with me. One day I will go see this myself. Just a stunning biomass and concentration of birds. So we think about the structure of birds, and we know that white-rumped and barred sandpipers tend to have a little bit longer wings than, say, least and semi-palmated sandpipers. And that's to help facilitate a longer migration. Those long wings of the curlew sandpiper, these birds are flying thousands of miles in migration. That's why they need to keep the feathers in top shape to complete these flights. Pectoral sandpipers, we can argue a lot about who has the longest migration routes. I think Arctic tern usually gets the nod, black-bellied plovers sometimes, but pectoral sandpipers are right there with them. These birds are breeding in Siberia and in eastern Russia. They're traveling all the way across from there to across the Bering Sea to Alaska, all the way down to Argentina, southern Chile. Just huge migrations, 9,000 miles one way. Whimbrels have a phenomenal migration as well. There's been documentation of whimbrels flying through hurricanes during their fall migration. So one bird that was fitted with a GPS tracking device flew into Hurricane Irene in 2011 and spent 27 hours flying into strong headwinds, traveling just 9 miles per hour. Once through the eye, her rate of speed increased to almost 100 miles per hour, and she made it to one of the islands in the South Atlantic there. Amazing stuff. and they will eventually go on down to Brazil and points south in South America. At some point during their migration, a lot of these birds are actually traveling closer to Africa than they are to the mainland U.S. Just amazing stuff. But the real champion, the bar-tailed godwit, and amazingly enough, the story that I've been telling in this program talks about a female that traveled over 7,000 miles in 9 days. Well, this fall, a male outdid her and traveled over 7,500 miles in 11 days, flying from southwestern Alaska towards Hawaii, and then turning nonstop flight from southwestern Alaska all the way to New Zealand, 11 days and 7,500 miles. I haven't updated the slide. I just saw this information today. Just an incredible feat. These birds are shrinking their internal organs to save weight and make room for more fat reserves. And I've actually spoken to folks from, I can't remember if he's from Australia or New Zealand, but he'd actually seen bar-tailed godwits at the completion of these flights with the keel bone, the breastbone, almost visible through the chest wall. This big plump shorebird, totally emaciated at the completion of this journey. Just amazing stuff. It never ceases to amaze me. But here's the route, flying southwest towards Hawaii, bending, again, nonstop, all the way to New Zealand. I get winded jogging out to the mailbox, so it's impressive stuff. I want to share one last story with you. It's a very special bird here, a purple sandpiper, showed up on the beach at Whitefish Point. And this was actually in early September, a full 6 or 7 weeks before they're normally expected at Whitefish Point. Totally unexpected bird. But it flew in and landed in a depression in my shadow and hunkered down and looked up. Like, what is this bird doing? Well, a couple of minutes later, a merlin came rocketing down the beach at Mach 2, like just screaming. And this bird hunkered and hid in my shadow in this little depression until the merlin left. And the purple sandpiper then joined up with a sanderling. And those birds literally followed me up and down the beach. I couldn't get far away enough from them for the shot most of the time. I had to keep moving back. And I think their game plan was just to know that the merlin was not going to come as close to me as they were willing to come to me. So I was just kind of a protection point for them. Just a really cool experience. And that is all I have. I think Rob will open it up for questions now.
Yeah, any questions, you can either unmute and ask your question or send it in chat and I can ask it. Any questions out there?
Hi, Judy.
Well, it looks like we don't have any questions. I don't see anyone trying to unmute. Oh, we have one of what camera gear do you use, Brian?
So I'm using a Canon 500 millimeter f4 lens, usually with a 1.4 teleconverter. Whoops, where are we at here? I was going to go back to the shot.
Oh yeah, view. That should.
So that's the 500 millimeter lens. The 1.4 converter is kind of hidden behind my hand there, and that camera body is probably the EOS 1DX. I'm currently using the 1DX3. Typically, when working around water, it's going to be smart to use a tripod so that you have your hands free to help get up and put your stuff at a little less risk that way. The tripod was left on the beach, and I was in the water to get the best light angle for the shot.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. We have, let's see, in Wilcox, best time to go. Have you shot at Wilcox, Brian?
So I know at Wilcox in Southeast Arizona, you get birds during migration there. Is that what we're talking about?
I think so. That's what I'm seeing as a question. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think they're talking about best time to see cranes.
Okay, best time to see cranes.
I know they're seeing a lot of cranes in Arizona right now. New Mexico at Bosque del Apache is a famous place for cranes in the fall around Thanksgiving time, but on through December until the marshes freeze up, the cranes will be there. And I know Nebraska, that's more of a spring thing. Is that March?
Yeah, that's March. So I think that's all we have for you this evening. Thanks everyone for joining us. We have a couple more programs that are going to be scheduled coming up, so please keep an eye on our website as well as our social media. You can keep track of all of our upcoming presentations there. We also have our trivia night that we've been doing monthly coming up next Wednesday. So grab a team and join us for trivia via Zoom as well. And if you have any questions about that, please just let us know either through email or through social media. And Brian, anything else tonight?
No, just thanks everyone for tuning in. I enjoy giving these, so we'll be having more of them soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.